Coming to you live from an abandoned storage locker somewhere in Mesa, Arizona. You're tuned into the Important Nonsense Podcast with Steve Bonham.
Attention, Alan Hearn's mom. His knee is better. You can stop worrying.
And Neil Smith.
Even with the concussion, as long as he's cleared, probably don't have a better option.
Ooh, boom shakalaka.
Welcome in. It is the Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham and Neil Smith, as usual. Special treat. It is our Thanksgiving special. So because we will not be doing our usual halftime show on Thursdays, if you're not watching, you should be. Every Thursday during the Thursday Night Football halftime show, we do Locked In, where we do player props from Underdog with our guys joining us here tonight so we can break down all of the Thanksgiving action tomorrow. Vishaal Gupta Mason Cameron. Vishaal, welcome to the show. First time. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. This should be a lot of fun.
Mason, how about you? How you doing?
Spectacular. Doing spectacular. I'm glad that we get to break this down in a big, long one now. Now they let us run loose, run wild.
Right. You don't have to cram it all into 15 minutes. You can take your sweet time breaking this down.
Well, Vishaal's allowed to say whatever he wants. Mason, 15 words or less.
I'm long-winded as it goes. So
I think like 95% of our Thursday show is Mason's analysis of his picks.
It really is. And Steve has a music button to walk me off like the Oscars acceptance speeches for sure.
Yeah, there's someone off screen in Mason's room waiting with a hook. Every time we go live.
That old Chappelle Show wrap it up box skit
exactly.
20 years ago. Oh my God.
That's what it is. And of course, Neil. Neil, how we doing, buddy? It's another one. Now, this is a unique one for us. This is year 5 for season 5 of us doing the podcast. This is the first year we've actually done it on a Wednesday, though. Normally, we move it up to a Tuesday.
Well, yeah. Normally, you and I are all on the map.
Yeah, to make sure that we accommodate the audio listener more. But again, the live show,
the live show
suits our audience to do it the day before. So.
Yeah, hate to tell you, but the live show. Welcome to the reality of producing content in 2021.
Yeah, welcome to
video wins. That's just how it goes.
I mean, you want to watch it live anyway, because then you get, we can't edit this out, guys. If something weird happens, if something gets crazy, you get to watch it live, and we can't catch it. So
no, and folks who do actually watch it got a taste of that a couple of weeks back when there was, let's say, an incident that shockingly wasn't generated by me, with someone saying something that you're really not allowed to say.
What we're waiting for. Yeah.
Normally it's me. Anytime you put me in front of a live microphone is possibly the last time it's going to happen.
Right.
So, but fortunately it wasn't me. And it's interesting because you would think that the individual who made the faux pas in question would know better.
You would think so.
You would think so.
All right, let's go through these games. We've got 3 games tomorrow on the slate, and we'll kick it off with the first game of the day, the one that'll really set your palate for the day. It'll let you purge so that you've got an empty stomach ready to go into your Thanksgiving dinners, just ready to eat as much as you possibly can. So Bears Lions,
wow.
What a disgusting,
it'll empty out.
What a disgusting, gross game this is going to be. Ugh. Neil, what do you got notes wise for Bears versus Lions?
So before we get into the Lions, folks, which is what I know, I go through all the numbers. I know what's popular and what's not. The draw here is Mason and Vishaal. All right. So Steve and I are going to get out of this as quickly as possible. So we're going to break this game down, and then we'll get into the Lions, which is what all the degenerate gamblers who are filing in here really want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So in terms of Bears Lions, there really isn't that much in terms of things that redraft fantasy players would need to know. No Justin Fields. That is material. I doubt you were starting Justin Fields, but it matters for what's left of the skill position guys, and I use that very deliberately. We're back to Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's going to start.
Right, exactly.
He had 2 touchdowns. Easy last week. He's a star.
Well, Vishaal, I know you're also a Bears fan. Steve and I are both bitter Chicago natives. Bears fans by birthright. It has not been a pleasant ride.
Nope.
So feel free to jump in here whenever. But Andy Dalton's going to start.
Mm-hmm.
I
think it's actually involuntary.
It is. I can't get through it. That's just the reaction I have to it. However, this is reportedly Matt Nagy's last game as the Bears head coach.
Reportedly.
Long overdue, if true.
And I will say on that, George McCaskey had a meeting with the team today and said that the rumor is not true and they believe in Matt Nagy still. We'll see. We'll see.
Sure. And I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you in New York to use a literary reference.
And we talked about this in our side chat as well. I think it's the most bizarre thing. Like if the plan and the intention is to fire Matt Nagy no matter what, why not just do it? What are you waiting for?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to do that if they win tomorrow. Like
you're applying conventional logic and wisdom that would make sense to a group of people that are devoid of logic and reason.
And I also pointed that out too, Vishaal, was the fact that, look, it would be the most Bears thing possible if they were to lose 5 in a row, let him keep his job, and then as soon as he wins one, all right, you're fired. That would be the most Bears move they could possibly make.
It's all based on this arbitrary thing that franchises think that we care about their moral standing of I didn't fire a coach until after the season. Like, we don't remember that and we don't care. We see that your team struggles and that you lack leadership, and you continuing to not move forward with that is a disgrace to your fans and your franchise. And more teams need to realize that. And they just don't. It happens every single year where we hear a guy that's like just on the hot seat. He's on the hot seat and he's on the hot seat. And then we run into a situation like this where they're like, well, how can we fire him? He beat the Lions.
Right.
It's just, it doesn't make sense.
I think a more accurate report would probably be he's playing for his job, because I don't know how you can fire him if they win. But if they lose to the Lions, he deserves to be fired no matter what. I mean, he deserves it anyway. But if you lose to the Lions, you deserve to be fired for sure.
He deserved it the minute that he wouldn't give up play calling duties after it was made immediately apparent to everyone with even a cursory amount of football knowledge that he's not good at it. That's the fireable offense here.
Right.
And far be it for me to ever agree with either Mason or Al Davis, weirdly. But what I will say is just win, baby.
There you go.
Is actually very accurate. It's all the fan bases care about, and teams can say whatever they want, but no one cares. It's all down to, did you go to the playoffs? Did you win enough games to get me to the playoffs so that I can get drunk and then swear at you while I watch the game? That's your average football fan. That's it.
Yeah, I just want them to win enough games that we don't have to hear Giants fans talking about that pick all offseason. That would be the worst. So just like, don't be a top 10 or 15 pick, and I don't really care what happens the rest of the way.
I'll give you that. And go and beating the Lions would really help out with that here tomorrow. A game you really need to win. Just to wrap up the notes, Allen Robinson is listed as doubtful. By now, you have already likely secured alternative arrangements for that. And on the Lions side of the ball, there is only one thing to note. It's Jared Goff is questionable. There is some optimism that he's going to start that game. I would argue that nothing Lions related matters. You were not playing Jared Goff at all. And the only startable Lion is Deandre Swift. There is no other startable Lion. That's it. It's one player. And if anything was to happen to that, maybe Jamal Williams would be startable, but even that would be borderline. So
does that mean that you're completely done with TJ Hawkinson?
Yes.
Because, I mean, coming into the year, he was a top 4 guy.
I'm being facetious, and I actually misspoke there. So, yeah, TJ Hawkinson would be the other borderline startable Lion that you would likely. But mostly at this point,
but it's not locked in, is
right?
the thing.
It's
right?
not.
It's not.
It's also like he, what else is there? Tight end is a barren wasteland.
That's what I was just getting to. It's by attrition. TJ Hawkinson still matters.
Right.
But he's been dreadful the last few weeks. No one can deny it. But again, it's like, I guess if you could pick up Pat Freiermuth, but like, what else is available?
Yeah.
Maybe Logan Thomas was available and he somehow gets cleared to play, but you got to make that decision in such a weird way that you're probably playing Hawkinson anyway.
Right.
So how's that helpful?
It's bizarre because he had this whole connection at the beginning of the season with Jared Goff, and they looked good, and he loves throwing to the tight end because whatever, it's what he does. The check downs, he doesn't like throwing the ball deep.
Well, he's incapable of throwing the ball deep, but that's a whole different conversation.
They get into these voids where it's like he had 11 targets, 9 targets, and then 2 targets against Baltimore, and then 8, and then 3, and then 11, 9, 11, 1 with no catches. And then Tim Boyle starts and he goes 6 for 51. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 2, which is concerning, but he's certainly getting the volume because, I mean, like we've said, there's really nothing else. So I would still play Hawkinson if I had him because you probably have to, but you don't feel great about it.
No,
Swift
it's
is the
not.
only one you're playing and you feel good about it.
Right.
I think
And
that's
realistically,
the best way
there's
to put
nothing
it.
else. Like, you're not going to play Khalif Raymond. You're not going to play
No.
any of that schlock. You're not going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, although I would argue that for Dynasty, he's the only one out of that receiver room that matters even a little bit, because maybe something good could happen.
Right.
But
and
realistically,
I'm curious, it hasn't been that long that he's been there, but Josh Reynolds, seeing the connection with him and Goff, if that's still there from their time together in LA, how much the playbook has he picked up in what has it been? Not even a week, right?
Yeah,
it's been on the roster
5
there.
days, something like that.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they picked him up at the end of last week and he wasn't able to play this past weekend. So I don't know. That's another one that's a little interesting because he's young enough and he might have the connection, but we'll see. For redraft, no, it doesn't matter.
Well, I was going to say, and what's funny about this, how little any of this matters.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about this morning game. This is the Epicac, effectively, to clean you out, to get you ready for Thanksgiving properly, get all that bile out, and we'll start fresh, because that's how little this matters. You're talking about functionally, how many fantasy starters are even in this game total? David Montgomery, Deandre Swift, Darnell Mooney, TJ Hawkinson, I guess.
Right.
Keep going, guys. I got the big four.
No, even if that.
Yeah.
I mean, in some of those occasions, hopefully you've got some other, like we were talking about Allen Robinson, like as an Allen Robinson manager, I hope that you guys have some other options. If you savages are still rolling with Allen Robinson, I'm sorry. Right. I am.
What league is that? What 17, 18, 20 team league are you playing in that there was nothing else that
well, I mean, given where you drafted him, unfortunately, the reality is like you're a 2-9 team just setting a lineup because
it's a keeper.
You're not.
Yeah,
you have Fantasy Pros and you've already long clicked autopilot.
Yeah, you're just autopiloting.
You're just not doing that one anymore.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I set that up is because for redraft purposes, we've covered it.
Yeah.
It took less than 10 minutes.
Yep.
And so I think we should talk about the lines, because the only reason to watch this game is for gambling purposes.
It's actually like in the gambling world, it's actually the only game that's gonna like really be that competitive. The rest of them just aren't looking like they're gonna be, and that's that can be okay. Mediocre football can be fine.
Helps the digestion.
If you put some money on it. So I mean, neither team have really played that poorly recently. They've played relatively close. They're actually both about 2-1 against the spread in the last 3, which is pretty impressive. I could see this one, being a close game down the stretch. Dalton starting this week with a little bit more practice should hopefully get them a little, closer, a little foot in the door, a little more production. The last time that he started with them in week 1 and they got that full game in, Monty actually had a big game, and that's kind of where I like this week. I think Monty's actually a shoe-in for a really big week. We have some, indecision if the Lions are going to start Goff. So if Tim Boyle is actually running out there, I have a hard time not taking the -3 for Chicago. It's just, I don't know.
I think a report just came out. Goff is going to be starting tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's official or not. But
okay,
it's not. It's not. That was the report I gave.
That way.
They're trending him in that direction. Nobody will confirm anything.
I like the -3 anyway, but if it's Boyle, slam it, because he looked as bad as I think I've ever seen a player look, and God bless him for coming.
No. You're just too young. You don't remember Tyler Palco.
Yeah.
You don't remember what I refer to as the Tyler Palco competency test. Can you snap a football? That's the worst thing that's ever happened. Like, at least Boyle snapped the ball and was able to actually get it out of his hand.
He only lost by 3 points last week. That's pretty good.
He was dealing with the injury a little bit in the Pittsburgh game. That is Goff. And then after that, they went with Boyle last week. If he is able to go this week, he still may be slightly limited. I would assume it's going to end up being a low-scoring game in that regard. Like, if they're going to just be more conservative, run the ball aggressively. And to Mason's point, like, David Montgomery could have a monster game against this Lions defense. So, I mean, the over-under right now is 41.5. I would lean the under. That would be my impression, especially if you're talking about Andy Dalton against anybody. I tend to lean the under on points.
on the surface, the number seems low when you look at the rest of the slate, but it's not when you look at these two teams in a nutshell. they're both a couple of the worst offenses and defenses, ELO rating wise, in the entire NFL, and it's pretty well documented at this point.
Yeah, for sure. The under is definitely the play here, and I'm totally on board with the Monty play as well. I think he scored 4 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 games combined that the Bears are playing against the Lions going back to last year. So he loves playing against the Lions, so it should definitely be a big game for him.
In terms of like individual players, we talked about Deandre Swift being the only one that really matters for like a fantasy perspective that you can set and be relied on. In Underdog right now, it's 102.5 total yards for Deandre Swift. How are you guys feeling about that? Because he hadn't had over 50 yards rushing in any game this season until the last 2 weeks when he's gone over 130 in both games. So he's been on an absolute tear, completely on fire. The last time these two teams played in week 4, he only went 8 for 16. But remember, that was in that like weird alternate universe when Dan Campbell was having them run the ball more with Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams went 14 for 66 in that same game. So if the roles reverse and Swift is the lead back and he's getting the pass catching yardage, that would be about 100 yards in that game against Chicago. And Chicago is one of the worst rush defenses in the league right now. We already talked about Goff being injured, them not throwing the ball a lot. I think a lot of the offense is going to go through Swift. And even if you know it, Chicago can't seem to stop it. So do you like this line? Do you like this number on
Before
Swift?
they answer that, Steve, I will point out one thing. Somewhere along the way in there, it's important to point out that Jamal Williams, part of what I think is going on there with the usage is Jamal Williams missed the last 2 weeks. He's back this week, but he was ruled out he actually, you know what? He was ruled out the week prior. Last week.
Yeah, he played last week.
He did play last week, but he was ruled out for one of those games. I know for a fact.
Yeah, he was ruled out 2 weeks ago, and Deandre Swift in that game played 93% of the offensive snaps.
Yeah, which I know they don't love.
Monster game against Pittsburgh, and he had 33 carries for 130 yards. Gigantic game.
Yeah, they're going to get him killed.
Right. So this past week, Jamal Williams was back. He had 7 carries for 11 yards, and Swift only had 14 carries and still had 136 yards rushing.
Okay, one of those is the long touchdown. So that makes sense.
And the thing is that I, without seeing it right in front of me, off the top of my head, these lines for Swift have been almost 20 yards even higher than that number right there. So I think we're seeing this weird kind of thing where odds makers aren't quite buying into that volume and that production popping. But I think that this number gets into the realm of like, well, he was already really close with that. He's such a big part of the receiving game that he doesn't really have to blow it all out on the ground. So I think that it's a super reasonable number to go over on for sure.
Yeah. Right now, let's see, just getting a general gauge of it here. Let's see. DraftKings has him at 33.5 for the over-under on receiving yards and 67.5 on the rushing yards. So total about the same, about 100 yards.
Yeah.
Same neighborhood. To me, I like it. I like the over. Like I said, I think he's going to be a majority of their offense, and the Bears can't stop it. So it's close for sure. I could understand the hesitation, but he's been so hot lately that, I mean, outside of him getting hurt, knock on wood, like I think he can hit this over pretty easily, even though it's a big number, like we talked about. Is there anything else that like
that's where those combos ones always, they seem much higher than they are sometimes, because you really get into some of these other backs will get into the realm of 80, 90 yards in rushing alone.
Yeah.
And when you can bank on a guy like Swift, who's like almost a Kamara in a way where you're like, dude, 50-50 is just a just a cutaway. Like
that is the comp. It's been the comp on him for a long time. He is mini Kamara. He profiles out that way.
Exactly.
So.
Right. And that's been the thing too, because over the last 2 weeks, like I mentioned, he's got 130 rushing yards and then 136. So in these last 2 games, I can pull it up right. There we go. Yeah. Last 2 games, he has a combined 266 rushing yards and only 5 receiving yards. Like, he's gotten 10 targets, but only 6 catches for 5 total yards in the receiving game. Whereas everything before that, to start the season, he was averaging about 36 rush yards a game and 52 receiving yards. So he was still up near 90 total yards on average when he was getting a majority of work in the passing game. But now he's getting a ton of work still in the rushing game and the targets. The yardage just hasn't been there.
Right.
So for me, he's gone over this number easily in rushing yards the last 2 weeks. If he can connect on any of those targets he's been getting, get some receptions and receiving yards, I think this is an easy one. Is there anything on the Bears side that sticks out to you guys through the props?
You got anything, V? I know I think I saw you had one.
Yeah, I had one. I had Mooney over 58.5 receiving yards. I think we already talked a little about A-Rob is listed as doubtful. He's probably not going to play. Mooney had 16 targets last week. I'm pretty positive that's a career high for him so far. When they played in week 4, Mooney had 125 receiving yards. That was with Fields under center. But Dalton definitely liked him a lot last week. I just think he's going to have plenty of targets, and the Lions are terrible, and they're in their secondary. This shouldn't be too difficult for him to hit the over on this one.
Yeah, wide receivers averaging 163 yards a game against the Lions defense. So that's
if you're watching this, Jack, we're sorry to have to drag the Lions.
Right. I feel bad breaking down Lions football without Jack here, but that's all right. All right.
And then I had one too here.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Neil.
Well, I have a sarcastic question. So do the serious thing first.
I was just gonna say. So we talked about Monty, and I have one here too. I have Monty over a rushing touchdown. We kind of alluded to it earlier. I got burned last week on Monty, but I still like the process, and I'm pretty stubborn. So I'm gonna go back to the well here. The last time Dalton was the full starter we talked about was week 1. Monty had 108 and a touchdown. I see it going this way. We already talked about the Lions are really bad against running backs. It's Monty could have had one, or last week they let Chubb go absolutely ballistic against him. He would have had a touchdown, but Juice Landry vultured it. So never thought I would say that, but that's how it goes.
All right, Neil, what's your sarcastic question?
What's the prop for over under on total number of interceptions thrown in this game? And that
would be a good one.
Where can I put money on that? Maybe we need Daryl to get back to do a repeat, do his old thing and get back on monkey knife fight for me. Because
either secondary is very good at catching the ball, so they'll have plenty of opportunities. I just don't know if they're going to complete the process. So maybe over 5.5 interceptable passes. But in terms of actual interception,
turnover.
I want it to be set at 3, and I want to slam the over on number of picks actually thrown in the game on that. Because if it's 3, I might take the over on that. That's how bad this game is going to be. There's going to be a lot of turnovers. Andy Dalton never met an INT that he wasn't willing to commit. So, and then if it is Tim Boyle, it should be 5. We set the line at 5.
Absolutely asinine stat. Somebody, it might have been Jack that tweeted it. Something about Tim Boyle's time in college or something. 1 touchdown, 13 picks, or just something. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
My Lord.
It is Tim Boyle, by the way. The Bears defense becomes an incredible streaming option. That's the one other starting thing for regular fantasy you might want.
I did that in 1 league. I picked him up.
Yeah, I'm doing it in 1 league too, where I have lack of better options. So I'm like, why not?
All right. Well, I think we've harped on this.
But let's also take a moment to let everybody know. Go into the future. Throw the D and special teams in the trash. Your fantasy league doesn't need it. Please and thank you.
I'd love, one of the leagues Steve and I play in that we architected from the ground up. There are no defenses or kickers anywhere to be seen. So, but we'll move on from this utter dumpster fire we'll move into what we'll call the first course. So this is your salad right here.
The game in my backyard.
So the game in Steve's backyard, and it'll look a lot like a backyard football game for most of it, given the defenses that will be playing in it.
Just run around and wait for the ball.
Yeah, it's Cowboys Raiders, folks. This is not going to be a pretty game, but it is going to be a serviceable game. This is your salad course right here before we get into turkey. So this is gonna it'll cleanse the palate after the horrible epic hack that you have to get through. Sleep in if you can. Don't worry about that first game. But Cowboys Raiders might actually be entertaining because you're going to have a couple of bad defenses and a couple of offenses that if the Raiders actually want to be competent on offense for this game, they have some ability to move the ball. And it's going to be an interesting, this is kind of like, this game sort of feels like the Spider-Man meme, given how the Cowboys have played the last couple of weeks. They're obviously better, but it's just the last couple of weeks, the Cowboys, I don't know what's going on there. But this is just a reminder on the Cowboys side of the ball, Amari Cooper will not be playing in this game. He's on the COVID list, so he was already ruled out. The biggest piece of news is CeeDee Lamb dealing with a concussion. He missed practice on Tuesday. He was limited today. If he's playing, I'm starting him. I don't think you have better options. I really doubt it. And I'm not really worried about it. It's just a question of will he start and will he be able to play? So to that end, the big trendy pickup for this whole endeavor is Cedric Wilson. Cedric Wilson, who we've seen have limited value at various points along the way this season. I'm personally not really a fan of the man's skill set. However, opportunity is king. And if you've got no Amari Cooper and you've got no CeeDee Lamb, for example, is Cedric Wilson worth it to anybody here on this meeting, effectively? Who's interested? Anybody? Nobody?
No, not me.
No, I don't think so either, because I'd hope that you would just kind of head in a different direction. He was all over my waiver wires in every league, and he sat, and I was a little surprised that nobody took a plunge there, but I think it's just because in most leagues you hopefully have a bench option to replace.
You have a better play. Yeah.
The one position that's actually deep. Like if you don't have better options than Wilson, then you're just not working hard enough on the waiver wire, because there's guys out there that are just better options.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
he's
whether CeeDee Lamb plays or not, I think the biggest benefactor to Cooper being out, just like it was last week, is Michael Gallup. I think he probably is the primary guy leading the charge here. So
that goes without saying, Steve, which is why you can't pick up Gallup.
I'm just saying, Neil, you didn't mention Michael Gallup at all. So I'm saying if you've got Michael Gallup, that's the one I would play. That
information would have only been relevant 2 weeks ago. That's why I didn't mention it.
Well, we're talking about time machines here. We can go back.
This is our old married couple section of the show.
No, in terms of Cedric Wilson, I think his biggest the biggest asset to Cedric Wilson was when CeeDee Lamb was out, and the fact that they were playing from behind against Kansas City. So I don't think he's that big of a factor here, because odds are this isn't a shootout. Yeah. Odds are this is more of the Cowboys are in control. It's closer to the game 2 weeks ago against Atlanta when they blew out the Falcons than it is to the game last week when they were struggling and losing to Kansas City.
My greater point is I have Wilson in the 40s for my rankings for this week. So there's a non-zero chance that he's going to end up needing to be rostered in your league. There is likely somebody desperate enough to take the plunge on that. So for me, he's coming in the 40s. He's a flex. Like, love it, hate it, I don't think it matters. He's a flex for me. That's the whole reason that this is even a topic, is if you're desperate and you need somebody to get you through, because there's every chance that, you struck out at various places along the way here, or you were really counting on Jamal Agnew, and now that's over. And it's like, there are scenarios where this is going to come up, and he's a very popular topic for other outlets, and he's not awful is the other thing too. It's not like I'm sitting here saying
he's okay.
He's okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's in the 40s for me. He's a flex. There are worse options that I've seen being bandied around. Right. For example, if he wasn't on bye, this would matter more. But Mecole Hardman, for example, would be a guy in that range regularly that I'd be like, no, I would totally drop. Assuming he was, let's for a second assume he's not on bye, I would drop Mecole Hardman for Cedric Wilson. I would drop Robbie Anderson for Cedric Wilson on a 1 week rental. You should have done that 2 weeks ago. Like, that's talking about things that you should have done 2 weeks ago. Well, I saw a lot of people talking about they wanted Deontay Harris because he would have had a couple good games. I would start Wilson over Harris. I would cut Harris. You don't need Harris. Harris was like a 1 week rental. It's not helpful. Right. So there are, and to your point, Mason, yes, God bless these people who are going to be forced into this situation. But from reading the internet, it's a non-zero percentage of people that are.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like we kind of like hit on, like, hopefully you have somebody. Hopefully you've been a proper manager through your season to have better options through this. But like you said, it's not like he's going to be putting up a goose egg. He's definitely going to be getting snaps, given the
involved.
situation that they're going to be running into. It really just comes to that point about how much your quarterback feels comfortable, because we find so many times that, a guy will just lock in. It's just how it goes sometimes. They just lock in, feel their comfortableness, and just target a guy on routes that maybe they shouldn't target him on. And that's where good players sometimes, like Cedric Wilson, might get, by the wayside because he's open or whatever. But it's just, you're not.
It's also the Raiders secondary.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Raiders secondary here is also the other reason why this is somewhat attractive to me. So like I said, I'm not pushing the boat out for him. He's in the 40s, but he's definitely a flex if you're looking at this point. Good matchup for him. If CeeDee Lamb doesn't play, I feel a whole lot better about this because he's functionally the wide receiver too. Right. And Dalton Schultz has been good, but they've been struggling to get him the ball the last few weeks a little bit. Not so much last week, but the week prior. It's been a little weird recently. The whole team has been kind of weird with that. It's hard to pin it on Dalton Schultz, but it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen here, but he's in the 40s for me. And so that's really it. There is no relevant Raider news. And I'm sure the Raiders are thankful for that, given how much they have been in the news recently, and none of it's been positive. So it never is because it's the Raiders. But I don't have any relevant Raiders notes. Everybody is going to play, it seems like, and they're going to have their normal complement of weapons, such as they are.
And
normal
I'm not
in quotations.
Yeah, in quotations. Also, I will say I'm not at all bitter about or locked in from last week. And if you've got Dak at the half interception, I'll go ahead and take the under on that and say he will not throw an interception against this Raiders secondary that just cannot take the ball away from quarterbacks, even when it's Joe Burrow and he just gives it away willy-nilly. I'm not bitter, though. Not at all.
Never.
Not even a little bit.
No, the least bitter person I've ever met, too.
Exactly.
In general.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, they do not take the ball away at all. They do get to the quarterback considerably. They 2.3 sacks per game against opposing QBs. However, they have 36 pass attempts against them per game. They allow 24 completions per game. It's the worst of anyone, including Detroit, that's on the slate tomorrow. And they allow 232 passing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks. The number right now on Underdog is 266.5 for Dak's passing yards. And that feels high. Even though he's been good this season, he was not good in that game last week against a very bad defense. And in a game that I feel like they will control, 266 feels high.
The game script's not going to go their way for that to happen.
Yeah, this feels like a very run-heavy game to me on Dallas' side. And I expect a lot of Elliott, a lot of Tony Pollard in this one.
Yeah. I think Tony Pollard is an interesting one as well because he's probably going to get mixed in as to the passing game because of the lack of other options, like we were just talking about Cedric Wilson, and the fact that at some point, Zeke's dealing with injuries himself. At some point, they're going to sit Zeke down and try to preserve him. So
you brought that up, actually. I knew we'd get there eventually. Is anybody a little bit worried about Zeke for this week?
Yeah, absolutely.
His normal production. Yeah, I got him a few spots lower. Bumped Tony Pollard up a little bit in my rankings because of that.
I had to double check his status when I was looking at some of the lines.
So did I.
Because realistically, any kind of real ding, any real drop to Zeke's production in Pollard's line is extremely reasonable because it's at both rushing and receiving, at least on Underdog.
Yeah,
it's
total yards, 62 and a half.
62 and a half.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's
it's an extremely reasonable line. Even with his regular workload, it's a reasonable line. And so we've already established that they have these issues, and they need to kind of get back into what they were doing earlier on in the season, and that actually featured Pollard a lot more. Both these teams have just kind of fallen off a cliff offensively in the last 3 weeks. When you go up to play Denver and you pitch 30-0 through the first 3.5 quarters, there's an issue there. There's a schematic and deeper issue to your offense right there that's just not getting addressed.
Yeah, Pollard.
I think we can discount though the game against Atlanta 2 weeks ago. I feel like we're just talking about Dallas being a complete mess over the last few weeks, but they did put up 44 in Atlanta or against Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. Prescott was awesome. Zeke had a couple touchdowns. So I mean, I don't think it's as bad as maybe we're making it out to be, but they do have to be a little bit better for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. But
Yeah,
like to your point, 62.5 total yards for Pollard. He's beaten that number in 7 of their 10 games this season, including the last 2. So I feel like that's definitely that's an achievable number, even when Zeke is playing 100%. Zeke is banged up. There's a possibility that Pollard takes over the workload, and there's a possibility that the entire fourth quarter is Tony Pollard out there with the offense.
That's what I was going to say. Game script to me feels like it would go that way. If it goes the way I have it in my head, you're going to watch a lot of the Cowboys just running out the clock.
So Tony Pollard, that feels like a pretty good line there for me on that one.
Because Vegas is bleeding points right now. They have one of the worst scoring margins in the NFL right now, minus 17.7 over the last 3 games, second worst in the NFL, right behind Atlanta. It's just whatever Dallas is capable. Like, we haven't seen it. They've like been a little struggling, but like V said, they just did blow the doors off Atlanta. So we know that they can do it. I absolutely in no way see Las Vegas being able to do it. And unfortunately, it's all stuff that's kind of out of their control with the off the field issues that have all happened, but they have just absolutely been bleeding. So
yeah, it's rough out there right now. And the line in this game is actually 51.5, minus 7.5.
Yeah, slam the under. Slam.
It actually moved. I think it opened at like 50 or 50 and a half.
It did. It went up. It went up while I was researching today. Full point.
Yeah. So again, another one where I'm going to take the under. I'm with you guys. I think the Cowboys beat them pretty handily here, but 7.5. That's over a full touchdown.
Does that line assume Dallas scores 42 points?
Yeah, it does.
Much,
is that how that works?
100%. Yeah.
Like, is that how that's going to get? That have to be how they're doing that.
Right.
Okay.
It's like a backdoor over with the garbage time 13 to 35 touchdown type thing. That's what
pick 6 in the final 3 minutes.
Right.
Exactly.
So are you guys good then with the minus 7.5 for Dallas? Not scared of that line at all?
I'm a little scared. I mean, it feels like a tad too much, especially if you are saying that this is going to be a run heavy game. You're not expecting to put up a lot of points in that type of game script. So I'm not exactly sure. I'll probably just stay away. I don't know if I'm really leaning either way on this one.
You're not going to get the line to move the way you want it. So you have to take it now or don't. And I just wouldn't, because you want to be on the other side of 7 here. Or at the very least 7, but the hook here is going to ultimately get you in the end if you take this line.
Let's see. Anything like the Tony Pollard one was the one that definitely stuck out to me. They've got Zeke, or they did at least. It's currently off the board. The same as Montgomery with the over/under at half for.
I had that one on my ticket. I mean, I agree with you guys. Probably not a lot of yardage for him in this game, but I think he can definitely fall into the end zone. I mean, he's still going to be their goal line back in this game, and I think he'll have a couple opportunities. We saw Joe Mixon torch these guys last week. I think Zeke can have a couple opportunities at the goal line.
I was going to say, Vishaal, I was just going to point that out. Like, we just watched Cincinnati just make it a point, it felt like, to make sure that they stuck Joe Mixon in there twice. So I can see that happening again.
And then another one that's close, that's kind of interesting, depending on how the game script goes. Dak, 10.5 rush yards. I would favor the under there.
Interesting.
But I
play with fire on that, though.
Yeah, it's one such a low number.
Yeah.
That's one of those variance plays that's a little hard to peg
that's
exactly.
The main issue, because you have he hit that number against Denver a few weeks ago, but that was because of one long run. Other than that, he hasn't had more than 3 carries in any game since week 4. He had 4 for 35 against Carolina randomly, and he hasn't had more than 16 rushing yards in any other game.
Yeah, it could be an interesting thing. Maybe Kellen Moore planned some more read option plays this week because CeeDee Lamb and Cooper could be out. Maybe just to create some easy yardage for them potentially. It could be a little weird in this one, though.
Yeah, for me, I would lean towards the under on Dak there. Like coming into the season, the whole thing was what happened. Your franchise quarterback last year on a scramble against a division rival shattered his ankle and destroyed your entire season when you had Super Bowl aspirations.
Well, you can tell watching his tape that he does notice it.
the whole game plan now would be run less, just be more,
Yes.
throw the ball away. We'd rather you throw the ball away and get to second down than pick up 5 yards scrambling on first down. And just him getting that in his head and thinking about it, like I feel like that I would take the under on that as well. Let's see.
I also don't like
Anything
my
else?
quarterback thinking too much anyway, to be honest.
Sure.
I don't like him thinking back there when he's got 3 seconds to make a decision. You got to snap it and you got to make a decision.
Yeah.
Like thinking will get you killed.
I think everything on the Raiders side of the ball is pretty straightforward. Yep. So let's move on.
I was going to say there's nothing relevant.
I do have one.
Oh,
I
you
do
found
have
something.
one.
I scraped the internet for an hour
my
on Raiders
absolute
news. There's
for my
nothing.
Well, we
absolute
can come back to that
mean-
later when we go through the tickets because I know
Okay.
I already know
Oh,
what you're
okay.
gonna say.
Okay,
All right, we'll come back.
We'll come back.
We'll
to
come
it.
back.
Yeah.
All right, because I was going to say I spent an hour and there's nothing Raiders related. So if you found something, congratulations. It's slim pickings for the Raiders. But we'll get into the actual turkey of this slate here. Let's get into turkey time, turkey and stuffing. The NFL, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that there will be one watchable football game tomorrow that you could
Is it
actually turn your
watchable?
TV
I don't
on.
know.
Yeah, I might have to argue with you on that statement.
Trevor
there.
Simeon,
Well,
I don't
okay,
know.
I'll put it to you this way: when they wrote it on paper,
Sure. At the beginning of the year,
when they wrote it down and put it on the schedule, it was watchable.
Yeah, because they had
And
Jameis. Everybody wants to watch Jameis on Thursday night, throw up 6 picks. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
Well, they really want to watch Josh
Throw
Allen,
3 touchdowns.
and they want to watch the fan base get drunk and powerbomb each other through flaming tables.
Yes.
That's really what the people are here for. But it's Bills, Saints. It's the only thing close to watchable football we're gonna get all day. So whatever your opinions are, lot of Saints news. Lot of Saints news here. Alvin Kamara was ruled out here a couple hours ago. That is unfortunate. Mark Ingram, who would be in line for this huge workload, unfortunately is dealing with his own injuries already. He missed practice on Tuesday, and today he was only able to stretch. He didn't even get like a limited. He just stretched, and then they were like, "All right, go home." So that to me is scary. That does not bode well. I think he's a long shot. Is the note that I
Sure.
wrote. I don't think he's. So Kamara's already done. Mark Ingram is, I think, likely done. We'll find out tomorrow in the afternoon. So check in on that. If you're planning on rolling with Mark Ingram, I would have some sort of backup plan. To that point, Tony Jones. We've talked about Tony Jones Jr. on this show a few times. It's 2 questions. So one I think is relatively easy, and the other one I think is a little more complicated. If both Kamara and Ingram cannot play in this game, is Tony Jones a flex?
I
It
could
would depend on
see
your
it.
other options. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
running
your other
back is
options
so
are Tevin
solid.
Coleman, Rex Burkhead, or Dontrell Hilliard.
I'd probably
My
rather have Hilliard,
lord.
but
Welcome to running back waiver wire, Mason. I don't know if you've checked in on it recently, but those are that's your life this
Gosh.
time of the year. Your choices are Tevin Coleman because of injuries that he might actually get a meaningful role. Dontrell Hilliard by attrition, which we talked about this last week. No Titan in the backfield at this point is worth it to me. Tony Jones, if he had the whole job. And then I can give you the rest of them. Matt Breida, Rex Burkhead, because Philip Lindsay was cut.
I watched Jack on a weekly basis, so I knew who I picked up this week. Ty Johnson.
Ty Johnson would have been on the list, but Ty Johnson is now past the threshold, my friend. So yes, Ty Johnson would have been on the list if we were having this show yesterday.
Good work, people. Good work.
Absolutely. But he's too far past the threshold. So there's virtually nothing left at this point. But yeah, Ty Johnson was the number 1 waiver wire pickup for redraft for obvious reasons because he actually borderline mattered. He was at like 49%. It's cheating. You know what I mean? That's like cheating. He just got nudged over. So my point to you is, okay, let's give you options that might be on your team. Your other option is Zack Moss.
Oof.
I
feel attacked, Neil.
I'd rather pick somebody
I'm dealing with Mason. I'm here to give people the real analysis for their actual lives, okay? Like that's what we're doing.
Where'd you get my roster from? Is what I want to know. Why? How do you have
I got a
roster?
camera in your closet there.
In this specific game, I think there's a non-zero chance that Zack Moss is a healthy scratch. So I'm definitely not taking Zack Moss.
Okay, how about Kenyon Drake?
I would definitely play.
I know
Kenyon
you
Drake.
would say Kenyon Drake. That's not even a question that I should give you. It's not fair.
Well, Neil, you drive a hard bargain. Okay, I'll start Tony Jones. Shit.
I mean,
what I'm
Taylor,
saying.
we just saw the Bills give up 5 touchdowns to Jonathan Taylor last week. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world.
That's
if
Jonathan
if
Taylor.
had to
You-
play.
Yeah, I was gonna say
can't
that's
say
Jonathan
that.
Taylor. That's a different thing.
We just saw a team give up 40 points to Michael Jordan. They can't play defense.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I look at Jonathan Taylor as that good, but I mean, the Bills are not a world class.
This season, he's been that damn good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's on fire right now. And the Bills going into that game, I will say this. The Bills going into that game were the number 1 defense against running backs.
Mm-hmm.
They gave up the least amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs until they faced Jonathan Taylor, and they gave up 5 touchdowns and 50-something points, and they slid all the way down to number 7. So there's still a nightmare matchup. In terms of just like yards per game, they're 10th. They only give up 81 rushing yards a game to opposing running backs, and that's the entire team's running back core, not just individuals. So playing against the Bills is a nightmare scenario for me, for a backup who has been beaten out and other guys have been signed to take his job.
Oh, yeah.
I think even if Mark Ingram doesn't play, Tony Jones is probably the lead back, but he's going to split with Dwayne Washington. I mean, Dwayne Washington had basically as many snaps as Tony Jones did last week.
Maybe we see some extra Taysom Hill this week in that scenario too.
Yeah, I think they just get creative and they don't rely on any one guy. It just becomes a full committee. To me, if I can avoid Tony Jones, I'm doing it.
Okay. So to be fair, I have Tony Jones in like the 50s in my actual running back rankings. The reason I'm bringing it up is because those were done prior to the injury reports around Mark Ingram. So it's like you start to kind of unpack it. And Mason, the reason you feel attacked is because that's just the reality of like running back waiver wire right now. Is like it is so bad that anybody with a pulse that has half a job, I mean, that's how Tevin Coleman winds up on that list, where it literally is that. It's like anybody with a pulse that has half a job, you have to look at this point.
Well, and it's for our purposes too.
Awful.
Like we always talk about everything here, 12-team PPR.
Right.
So, I mean, Mason, you mentioned Ty Johnson. Absolutely, that's a PPR threat. Neil, you said Dontrell Hilliard. I would play Dontrell Hilliard, even though we said avoid Titans. Last week, he had 10 targets. He played so well. He got 8 catches for 47 yards, and they cut Adrian Peterson.
It's just so frustrating because I know he's going to get three snaps, not 3 targets, 3 snaps.
If Jeremy McNichols is back healthy this week, I think Hilliard gets relegated to strictly the third down back role. But right now, he's the only Titan running back that I would want. Yeah, and I would play him ahead of Tony Jones. Tony Jones took no passing snaps in that game last week. Dwayne Washington is the pass catching back. So you're talking about half a job. Like he would only be the between the tackles guy. Your hope would be that Tony Jones falls in the end zone would be what you were looking for.
What's your hope?
He's not going to get receptions. Guys. So I think there's more guys on that list and on waivers that have value getting short range passes and getting 4 or 5 catches for 10 yards. That's going to give you a 4 or a 5 than hoping that Tony Jones breaks one.
Yeah, that's why I didn't give you J.D. McKissick on that list, because he would be right in the same neighborhood, and I intentionally did not say J.D. McKissick because I'm like, well, everybody would play J.D. McKissick because all he would have to do is catch 3-4 balls, and he's paid you off, so that's why it's not fair. So that's why I also gave you guys the harder names, because we're industry professionals here at a website called importantnonsense.com.
Right.
Soon to be Important Nonsense LLC. The thing that I want to point out though is, well, it kind of makes the second question totally irrelevant, huh? Given how that first question went, because we'll move on from that. So then the only other like kind of Saints news is, just as a reminder, Adam Trotman finally has a big game and immediately gets hurt and is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. So pour one out for Adam Trotman. I actually feel terrible about that. It's a real shame. And then I have a weird fact. So weird fact, Traquan Smith is wide receiver 18 over the last 4 weeks. At no point in that span. What's that?
I said that's surprising. I wouldn't have thought
it is. It's a weird thing because in that span, he has yet to finish worse than wide receiver 40. And in the last 2 weeks, he's had 15 targets. Mm-hmm. That's Traquan Smith right now. I'm bringing this up because it was shocking to me when I was preparing the show sheet. So if I'm surprised by that, I got to figure there's more than just me. So this is worth bringing up to people because he's rostered in like 4% of leagues or something embarrassingly small. So as much as I don't like Traquan Smith, never have, probably never will, given where we are in the season, that's worth a waiver claim. That's worth taking a look at. If he's going to play like that with Trevor Siemian under center, as much as it makes me want to,
I think that's kind of the hang up too, is that I don't really love Traquan Smith. I really don't love Trevor Siemian. And
well,
so
you're biased and so am I. Because where we live and what we've endured. We're not you and I, our opinions have to be discounted on what Trevor
everybody
Siemian
at home, me and Neil aren't related. This is just how everybody in Denver looks.
You know what's funny is I was going to make that joke. I was going to make that joke at the start of the show where I was like, Mason, nice to see you wearing the official Denver uniform.
Yeah.
Long hair, facial hair, hat, pale.
Mm-hmm.
Pale.
That's right. That's what we look like.
We do look related, but it is completely coincidental. The fact that he and I live 15 minutes from each other.
It's just how mountain men look.
It's literally a coincidence. It's just the uniform for if you're going to live in Denver, this is what you wear. In fact, I'm in violation because I'm not wearing anything flannel. Mm-hmm. But I am wearing a beanie. I am wearing a beanie, so I do get a pass.
Right, there you go.
But that just for anybody who was paying attention, that Traquan Smith thing I thought was fascinating because I'm like, what is that about? But apparently he's got some sort of connection with Siemian going, and if he's going to put up those kind of numbers, that's a waiver claim. It's not one I feel great about, but it's got to be a waiver claim. And then there is no Bills news similar to the Raiders. So instead of Bills news, I have a question. And this actually dovetails onto the Zack Moss thing. Is any Bills running back even rosterable if they're going to give Matt Breida extra work like they have been? Anybody rosterable?
I think you just answered your own question, which would be Matt Breida.
Fair enough. Asked and answered type of thing. See,
I
don't even think Matt Breida is rosterable. There, I said it.
So let's see.
I don't think that they know how to run the ball.
I mean, that's also fair.
I love Brian Daboll, but it's just they just don't really have the tricks in the bag. They run a lot of the same concepts that were running last year against one high looks, and now you have two high shells that are all the rage. The cover 4 man matches are running wild. It's giving Mahomes problems. It's giving Josh Allen problems. And this offense, both offenses just haven't been. It's more than just they're not patient. It's a fact that they're having trouble reading these man match concepts that are just really causing them problems, and they don't have more tricks in the bag. And that's just how it's come down. And as a coordinator, they haven't had that run game or that ability to like scheme up bigger chunks on the ground, which has caused problems for them over the last 2 seasons.
Over the last 2 weeks, because that's when he's been back and healthy. But over the last 2 weeks, Matt Breida is in PPR RB 17. So
it's propped up by the one of the 2 games a little bit, but he wasn't not complete. He wasn't a total non-factor last week. It's slanted to the one big game where he put up
because he had 2 touchdowns in the blowout against the Jets.
Yeah, right. So that's why I'm saying is Matt Breida actually rosterable, or did he have one good game against a really, 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 really bad defense?
Yeah, without those he had a 6 without those touchdowns. He had a 7.5 last week against Indy in a blowout game.
Yeah,
I think it's promising from like a role sense at least. You know that they've had that trouble really pegging who's going to get those closer and goal line touches, and that at least kind of gives you some clarity. Now, like if you really want to ride with that more power to you. But it's a hard decision to make, and I think hopefully you have other options. But
well, I mean the numbers are saying the same thing I was telling you last week about Jeff Wilson, Neil. It's Matt Breida right now is a 6 or 3 touchdowns.
Right, sure.
It's the same.
Sure.
It's the Spider-Man meme with Jeff Wilson. It's this. If you love Jeff Wilson and you're convinced you need to start Jeff Wilson in your lineup because of opportunity, then play Matt Breida. It's the exact same thing. He'll give you a 6, or he'll score, or he'll score and give you 2 touchdowns and give you a 20. I mean, that's basically it.
The difference between the Matt Breida and the Jeff Wilson thing was my whole argument last week was Jeff Wilson wasn't competing with anyone, and he still only got you an 8. So you ended up more or less being correct to within a tolerance of one standard deviation. So I'll give it to you. And it's like, and that's kind of what's going on. I mean,
from what we've seen from Buffalo, who is Matt Breida competing with? Devin Singletary's terrible. Zack Moss has been terrible. Matt Breida's
he's been hurt and terrible. Like it's both for him. I'm not convinced he's actually completely recovered from the concussion and the various other maladies Zack Moss has been dealing with all year. Right. So I think he's just hurt and he's just bad. Yeah. At this point, they're all bad. It's all bad. So I suppose if you want to make that argument, go ahead and roll with Breida if you want, because at least in PPR he'd catch the passes. But for me, I just want to avoid all of it. If I in any way possibly can, I just want out of the Buffalo running back business at this point. And I would be willing to go. I think it would shock people how far to the lengths that I would go to get out of this. Like it is like there's no way that I'm going to feel. I would much rather play Dontrell Hilliard. Yes. And that's after me poo-pooing Dontrell Hilliard to you a minute ago. But if you're telling me my choices are anybody in Buffalo or Dontrell Hilliard, fire up Dontrell Hilliard. Yeah. Pray to God. Sacrifice goats. Do what you need to do to get this done. Like that's kind of where I'm at with it. And it's crazy because for most rankings that I've seen, Zack Moss is still like RB 40 roughly at this point. And I'm like, how in the world could you get to there given what we have seen? Like there is no
because us Zack Moss apologists run deep. We run deep.
The nail, as it were, I think.
Yeah.
I think you have hit upon it. Yeah. So that's really all I had as far as like traditional fantasy football news notes analysis for this actual game. Everything else is pretty straightforward. The Trayvon Smith thing is the one that shocked me. It's mostly because I think Trayvon Smith is terrible and clearly need to reevaluate at least part of that temporarily. But beyond that, I think we can pivot into the lines because I think there will be some interesting lines for this game from what I saw just digging around myself.
There's not actually a ton like in terms of individual player stuff available right now for this game just because it's the last game of the slate. So like right now the line is Bills -6. I feel pretty confident they're going to bounce back here against the Saints, especially with how they've played the last couple of games. That's a situation where you've got Bills by a touchdown. I feel like they can actually hit that.
See, this is where I was closer. I looking at it, the Saints actually play really well at home. They have a good defense. And they've actually stonewalled a couple of pretty good offenses this year at home with Tampa and Green Bay.
The Giants at home.
They did. Okay, they did. They did have to tell the people at home that they weren't going to go look it up.
I couldn't forget that one.
If he didn't say it, I was gonna. So mostly because I was already about to jump down your throat about the Saints have a pretty good defense. I was already like,
well, it's like.
Locking and loading, like no, they don't. Get at it.
It's not great.
Get off my show.
They do things that puts teams in a bind that makes them uncomfortable, and I think it's because they're a well-coached team. That they play decently well at home, minus when you poo-poo against the Giants.
The Bucs game a few weeks ago is a good example for your argument.
So
they
can, and I liked it at first, but without Kamara and without Mark Ingram, I don't see why. I even had this game at 6.5. I don't see 7 as 6 as value. I don't really see 7 as value there either. I'm like I might lean under, but that's just because I really don't know that the Saints have it in them to put up a bunch of points without most of their offense. So it's a kind of a wait and see. I'm probably going to be asleep with turkey syndrome at that point anyway. So who knows?
Yeah, the lines surrounding the Saints have been really, I think, weird the last couple of weeks with Simeon under center. 2 weeks ago, there were only 3-point underdogs going to Tennessee after Tennessee just came off a huge stretch of 5 in a row, including beating the Rams on Sunday night. I thought that was just a ridiculous line. Obviously, the Saints covered on a last-second touchdown.
Right.
But that was just way too low of a line, too much money on the Saints. And then followed up last week, there were only 1.5-point dogs to Philadelphia, which also just seems strange. I don't know why Simeon was getting so much love, and obviously they got blown out last week. This one finally feels like an appropriate line. them being 6-point underdogs, I feel is probably about where it should be. But I'll still take Buffalo because, I just don't see Buffalo pooping the bed 2 weeks in a row like that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like they started the year because of the hurricane in Jacksonville against Green Bay. That was their first official, home game of the season. But in actual games in the Superdome this year, they're 1-2. They beat Tampa 36-27, but then they lost that game in overtime to the Giants. And then 3 weeks ago, they lost 27-25 to the Falcons. So they haven't played spectacular at home. Their defense has been okay. They've held teams down a little bit, but no one's gotten over 30 against them at home, I guess is the way you would want to look at that. So maybe you're more into the over under at 45.5, trying to take the under on that, I guess, because the offense in general with no Kamara, with Trevor Siemian at the helm, I would feel like the Saints aren't going to be able to do much themselves. So maybe that would be the way to lean, is go the under there. But I still think Buffalo is going to be just fine and should be able to cover the 6 here.
True.
In terms of individual player stuff, they've got Josh Allen at 2.5 total touchdowns.
That was the one that I thought was interesting myself looking at it before the show started, because I'm like, that's it?
Yeah, he hasn't hit that number in a while.
I know, but it feels like last week might have been a trap game and they might have been looking ahead a little bit. Or maybe I'm wrong. That was the way I interpreted it.
Last time he hit 3 touchdowns was week 8 against Miami. And that was 3 total touchdowns. He had 1 rushing and 2 passing.
Generally, 2.5 is on the high end of a passing touchdown line anyway. I don't think you'll ever see anything go 3.5 higher, things like that. So you usually have like the 1.5 and they weight it a certain way, and then they really want to move it up. They'll move it up to 2.5 and weight it in a certain way. So, and with underdog, it's kind of what we come across to is that they preemptive move the line a little bit in the direction that they want it in order to not have to move it around so much, even though they still technically do.
Right.
So I see 2.5 as a little bit high.
Me too.
I spoke about it a little bit before, but they just have had trouble beating game plans. And some of these game plans have stonewalled what they want to do in the passing game. And we've already established their running struggles. And that's where we get games like what they did with Jacksonville, where they put up a stinker. Now we could talk about like how they were maybe looking ahead, or they mailed it in against a couple of bad teams, but it shows that they have some trouble with certain coverages, getting their guys open and getting to the looks they want to get to.
Yeah, the only thing that makes me hesitate about it is everything we talked about right before that, right? The fact that I feel like this is going to be under. I feel like they're going to cover that 6 pretty easily. If they're going to get to 21, 24, 27 points, so they can cover that number and win this game pretty easily here, who's going to score the touchdowns? Because it's probably not the running backs. So
this is total, right? This is not just passing.
Yeah, this is total.
That's why I was saying total. I thought it was
any total touchdown.
Oh, it's total.
It's total. No, if it was passing, I'd have been like, no, there's no chance he's going to do that. But total, I'm like, that's 2 passing touchdowns.
So if he throws for 2 and runs 1, that hits the over.
That's why I'm saying that's a money touchdown. And with the running backs being all screwed up, I thought that was why it would be attractive to me. It's 2 passing touchdowns and then a 1-yard bunny touchdown in a game I'm expecting them to control. That's all I'm expecting. So that's, for me, that was the one I was like, wow. Okay. And then I went back and looked, and yes, he's struggled. So that's why the line is what it is.
Yeah.
But I was like, given what I think of the Saints defense, which is to say not much, like, I think there's every chance that all he has to do is throw 2 passing touchdowns, and then at some point they get in the red zone, and because they don't trust their running backs, he just bodies up and goes in. Yeah. And then his day is probably over anyway. Right. They'll be winning by enough at that point, they'll sit him down.
And as much as it scares me, I will also say the current line on Josh Allen is, again, half an interception, as it tends to be. Right now, the Saints actually are top 5. They average over an interception per game, and Josh Allen has thrown at least 1 interception in 3 consecutive games. So him turning the ball over here at some point does kind of make sense to me. If you want to take the over on that one, I feel like that's a pretty comfortable play.
Yeah, the impressive part is that with the number of interceptions that Josh Allen has thrown, he has still had tremendous touchdown or tremendous interception luck. Yeah. The guy leads the NFL in turnover-worthy throws. with 18.
Yep.
With only 8 interceptions, that means he's got 10 balls that could have been turned over that just weren't.
Right.
And that means that his downfall, his decrease from this year to last year is even more precipitous than we think.
Right.
Because it's just not showing on paper that ESPN's not running that Josh Allen has 18 interceptions.
Right.
That he's looking like Brett Favre.
Right.
Yeah.
He's looking like Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Or he's trying to be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's go into our picks for the week. We will start with Vishaal. Vishaal, what does your ticket look like for this week?
All right, so we'll start with, we talked about it earlier, Darnell Mooney over 50.5 receiving yards. I think this line just probably, I don't know, maybe 20 yards too low. If this was at 78.5, I would still like the over. I think he's just going to get all the targets and the lines can't cover anyone. I'll take Zeke over 0.5 rushing touchdowns. Again, like we said earlier, I think he can definitely just fall into the end zone. He'll get a couple cracks from the goal line, and he should be able to convert against a poor Raiders rush defense. And then finally, we just had a long conversation about the Bills running backs. I still think Singletary, even if he gets like 5 to 7 touches, he can go over 23.5 rushing yards. He's gone over this number in all but 2 games. And the Saints were torched last week by the Phillies rushing attack led by Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, all pretty below average guys. And I think this will just Bills will have a big lead. I think they'll try to maybe run out the clock a little bit and focus on the running game.
Yeah, Zack Moss is on here too with a low total as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about him.
Right.
I think he'll also, like I said, I think he's a healthy scratch with the way Breida has been playing lately. But it's tempting because if you can pick the right Buffalo running back, the numbers are so low, one of them has to hit the over, you would think, right?
Right.
Yeah. These numbers just reinforce what we're saying. Even though, you know, V is taking the over here, the line of 24.5 it's 25 yards for a presumably back that's going to get a number of carries in a game.
Yeah.
I was going to say
a reasonable line.
He should really only need about 5 carries,
right?
That, which he should easily get. That shouldn't be the hard part. So I'm as little as we think of the Buffalo running attack. If that's where they're going to set the line, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
All right, Mason, what do you got for this week?
So I've alluded to a few of these throughout our conversations tonight here, but for starters, I love David Montgomery. Like I said, I'm stubborn. I was burned by Monty last week, and I'm going back to the well. The Lions are just not good. I'm sorry, Jack. I love you, but they're just not good, and they are going to struggle to cover him. And this offense runs through him when Dalton is on the field. We've seen it on a number of occasions. And this seems like a pretty locked in over. This might even be my lock of the week here. So I started to allude to this next one earlier, but we shut it off for here. But this is the ultimate, just absolute disrespect line. I've never seen any line
this is the
like
greatest
this.
Prop of the season,
This
no
is
doubt.
absolutely the highlight of the season with this prop. Deshaun Jackson, 7.5 rushing and receiving. And not only when I was looking at this line, it was only 4.5. So somebody said, hey, we need to bump that sucker
up.
Right
now, by the way, it's at 11.5.
No.
I'd still take the over.
I'd still take it over because it's just
one play.
I was thinking about taking the under on the 4.5. I don't know what's going on here.
See, this is the thing, though. See, I know I just talked about the Raiders pretty much being absolutely inept on offense, and I'm not really big on Jackson or his signing to LV, but this is actually hilarious. But frankly, I get it. And just like V said, he was mulling over a under on the 4.5 line, and here we are, comfortable taking over on 11.5, and that's just says what type of player Djax is. He's just the epitome of boomer bust that he's been over the last decade or so, and his performances over the last 2 weeks just show up perfectly. Let me read this out here. Over his last 2 games since getting into Vegas, he has 2 touches in 2 games, 1 38-yard reception, 1 4-yard carry. So
nice.
So you are looking at potentially going over by 50 yards on a reception, or you're looking at missing it by him not getting a touch or something.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me on this too that I agree with is the fact that it's the total yards. Because if this was just like 11 and a half receiving yards, I'd be all with V and I would take the under on that for sure.
Right.
Because he either catches his one long target or he doesn't. So you've got a coin flip opportunity to hit that over or under. Whereas with the rushing and receiving yards, he could get an end around and run it for 20 yards and hit this over. Right. He doesn't even have to catch the ball. They just have to run a gadget play when they're losing by 30 in the third quarter. And he gains 20 yards for no reason and hits this over.
And that's why it was such a meme of a pick, because we just said it. I've never seen a line this low on rushing and receiving for a player that can take 2 balls to the house for $110 and 2 touchdowns. It's just that type of game for him. But and with their matchup, with Trayvon Diggs, I just we talk about his ability to pick off the ball, but nobody talks about his ability to let dudes run past him too. So that's
not as flashy.
Yeah, it doesn't follow the narrative quite as well. So if you see anybody talking about him for defensive MVP, that they probably don't pay attention. But anyway,
what's great to me about Trayvon Diggs is he is an actual legitimate defender. He's a DB, but he's basically the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, he scores a lot, but doesn't play any defense, and he's a defender.
Exactly,
defensive player. Yeah,
exactly. He's what looks like when you put a receiver on defense. They talk about it like it's a.
He sees his brother score touchdowns and he gets real jealous. But I think he scored more touchdowns than his brother has this year, so that's fine. All right, go ahead.
Let up more touchdowns. And so last but not least, we talked about this one too. I have the intercept. I hear Neil snickering, and I don't like it. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not snickering at Josh Allen. I'm not snickering at that. I'm more snickering at my own show that I'm doing for myself in my head, which is always the best way to run a real show.
Yeah.
The show that I'm doing in my head is, no, you got to take that under on 11. If it was 4, I would have loved it. If it was 4, you take that over. You smash that over on 4. You got to take 4, but 11, no, he'll never get there.
Yeah, if you want to write Daryl's piece for him, I'm
doing that
Friday
in my head because I'm having the meeting that they would have had to have
had.
Take the
over on 4, and I'd take it all the way up to 10.5.
Right.
Anything beyond that, take the under.
Take the under, and I'm just doing that. I'm doing that as in the form of the meeting that must have had to have happened at Underdog, or this email chain that had to have occurred. That has to exist somewhere, right? Because it's either a meeting or an email chain. It's like, Scott, what do you want to tell me about why you have the Deshaun Jackson over under at 4? And it's like, no, it has to be at least 7, Scott. I can't let you have it up there at 4. And then somebody else comes in, like the director. What are you doing? You can't have it at 7. It's got to be at 11.5, guys. What are you doing? And that's the meeting. That's Tuesday at the Underdog. That's just how that goes. So again,
how these lines work, how they set them to go behind the scenes here. Like Mason was saying, when you look at his 2 games, he had 1 game with 38 and 1 game at 4. With the carry. So you set the line at something that's in between and something that people will bet on. So they got enough people betting the over at 4.5 that they moved it up to 7.5, and people keep betting the over. So now it's at 11.
Degenerates who are betting on the over on Deshaun Jackson.
See, I like to think we're
the degenerates. We're the ones throwing away money.
It's us and then us telling people, which is not helping.
Yes. You're all welcome out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost more than enough money to a good joke before, so I'm all right.
All right, go ahead. Finish out your ticket here.
So last but not least, we were talking about Josh Allen, and that's actually why I called out Neil, because he was talking about the trap. But I'm gonna paint this picture like I did a little bit earlier. But you have a guy who was an MVP caliber player, and what if ESPN told you that he more than doubled the next player in interceptions on the season? I wouldn't have to do anything other than go back in time and talk to myself from any year that wasn't last year. And if you think I'm snickering about Josh Allen throwing interceptions, it would always be the opposite. Yeah. Because Josh Allen always throws interceptions. It's been our argument against Josh Allen every year.
is that he's horribly inaccurate, throws a lot of interceptions, and gets bailed out by his legs. That was right every year except for last year. And what's funny is now we're actually working our way back to that little by little.
Good.
Little by little, we're working our way back there.
So it was a great minds think alike.
Yes,
lab.
exactly.
Well, just catching you up on 5 years of Important Nonsense podcasts between Steve and I is we have always been the anti-Josh Allen show. Correct. Because we were wrong last year spectacularly because we were saying Josh Allen will never be a top 5 NFL quarterback, as people were saying, you're crazy, he absolutely will be. And we're like, no, that's wrong. He throws too many picks and it's too touchdown dependent. And then he had the greatest single season turnaround from an accuracy perspective in NFL history. Nobody else is even really close. It's a weird thing that happened, and we had to eat crow on it. And now I'm going to throw that crow back up year on year, little by little. That crow is going to exit my system because it's the weirdest anomaly I've ever seen. And I just don't, and I've been saying, I don't know that it's sustainable. But we had that conversation going even through the ranking summit and everything this year about we have to rank him this way, even though I don't know that what he did was sustainable, because it's just, we're going to have to just go with it at that point. And now little by little, to your point you made a minute ago, if even half of those interceptions that he could have thrown were actually picked off to go with the number he already has, every single news article and talking head on TV would be, what's wrong with Josh Allen? What's wrong with Buffalo? Because people only remember historically the last thing they just
Buffalo
saw.
would be spiraling worse than they already are.
Yeah. There'd be this whole thing about it, just like the Chiefs. And because of 5 or 10 balls roughly that weren't picked that could have been, we're spared living in that reality. That's what's going on in the background. But no, this has never been the Josh Allen podcast. No. This has always been the Jalen Hurts podcast. But at least we know who we are. Exactly. We're not pretending that he can throw. It just doesn't matter.
Gardner Minshew, Jalen Hurts, we're into quarterbacks that keep their starting job for one season. That's
right.
Us.
We love it.
We're all about.
We don't pretend like they can throw the ball accurately. That's the difference. We just know who we are.
That's right.
For those who don't know, Neil has to give that soliloquy in his home life at work to coworkers and family on the regular. Because here in Denver, we get the Josh Allen should have been drafted here conversation literally constantly. So,
what's messed up about that, Mason, is that frankly, I don't even have that conversation with people because what I tell them is, yeah, you're right. And we just move on. And we just move on because having that conversation is pointless.
Right.
You're not going to change anybody's mind on that, Mason. So I just go, yeah, you're right. And then we talk about Cortland Sutton. If you want to know how I deal with the locals, that's how I deal with the locals.
But anyway, so like we were saying, I mean, we don't even really need to chalk it up much more. I think that Neil pretty much wrapped it all up entirely. I am a little bit higher on the New Orleans defense than Neil is. Frankly, I think that Marshawn Lattimore is a lockdown corner, and they're gonna.
Will Marshawn Lattimore play the whole game, or will he get ejected in the first half for reasons?
I think that's the.
What's my over under on? What's my prop bet on that? When will what quarter will Marshawn Lattimore be ejected in?
It has to be 2.5. If he makes it past halftime, I would imagine what would be the line there. But so I think that we wrapped it up pretty good on Josh. But I like it.
Like I said earlier too, right now the Saints over an interception per game defensively. They're number 8 in terms of interceptions per game on the season, and Josh Allen's thrown an interception in each of the last 3 games. So like I said, I feel pretty confident going with you on that one. Here's my ticket. Try not to throw up too much. Neil will not be shocked by literally any of these.
No, things. All of this makes sense to me, actually. Every single thing about this.
The Andy Dalton line has moved up since I got it, but I got it at 209.5 passing yards against Detroit.
Fine.
Again, I think Deandre Swift is going to single-handedly keep them in this game, but we saw it last week. Andy Dalton is good for one long throw that Darnell Mooney can break for a touchdown, or Marquise Goodwin, or whoever it is that decides to break off a pass that Andy Dalton wobbles into their hands. I think he'll be all right getting over this number here. The official number is, let me do some quick pulling up here, 250 passing yards per game against the Detroit Lions secondary. So the line being at 210, it's currently at 217.5. I feel pretty good about that for Dalton hitting the over. Kenyon Drake, 36.5 total yards, not rushing or receiving, but total yards. Neil and I talked about this ad nauseum last week. We had a good conversation about Kenyon Drake and what I think he can do. The biggest thing for Kenyon Drake is if Josh Jacobs gets hurt, he suddenly has the entire workload. That's basically what you're banking on if you're playing Kenyon Drake. However, the Cowboys do give up a decent amount of total yards to running backs. This is a game where he can get checkdowns and can get receptions. And Kenyon Drake himself has been okay throughout the season. Officially, Kenyon Drake on the year has gotten close to this number a few times the last couple of weeks. He's gone over this number, I think, 4 times in total. Yes, 4 times in total. The last 2 games against Kansas City, he had a total of just 31 yards. Last week against Cincinnati, he had 29 yards. So again, he got close, but he hit this number each of the 3 games before that, after Gruden was gone and he's been more involved in the offense. So this is the number that's relatively still low enough that he should be able to achieve it. And if something happens to Jacobs and he misses even a few drives or a quarter, a number he should crush easily. And then Cole Beasley, because I can't quit you. I'll take a shot on Cole Beasley as usual. 40.5. He has not hit this total in the last 3 games. He's dealing with that injury. He is getting a ton of targets and receptions still. He's just not converting those into yards. So I think at some point he's going to be able to break that off. We just talked about the New Orleans secondary taking the ball away, but they are not very good. They give up a good amount of yards to opposing wide receivers. I think Cole Beasley is the benefactor here, and he gets well beyond this number. I think not only he beats it, but he kind of crushes it. So we will go ahead and take a look. If I can switch.
Well, while you're doing that, as a guy who rosters a lot of Cole Beasley in various formats and leagues, I would be thrilled.
You're all for it? Yeah.
If you want to let the, if you want to
you and me
speak that
both,
into
brother.
the universe,
you and me both.
Yeah, you want to speak that into the universe, I'm good with it. I'm worried about it though because of the return of Dawson Knox and frankly just Cole Beasley's insultingly low ADOT.
Yeah.
Like it's those 2 things.
Well, like
so,
the big thing there is I think he can break one.
I hope.
Yeah.
That's what you're counting on.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's look at these are our favorite plays. Vishaal, we will start with you as per the usual on our Thursday night show. So what is your lock of the week here?
Let's go ahead and lock the over on Darnell Mooney. I think, again, this is just
so it's at 59.5 right now, but it's close enough to what you had.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I would take this maybe even 20 yards higher. I think it's just an easy over for him.
Yep. Mason, what do you got?
Sorry, Jack. I'm going to go ahead and take David Montgomery over a rushing touchdown. And I feel really bad because we've been dragging our friend Jack's Detroit Lions for a little bit. You know, our buddy Matt Mercier, too. The Lions guys are probably not happy listening to this. But
I mean, they're used to it at this point, right? You can't say that this is anything new for them.
Yeah, exactly. I was really expecting you to take the Deshaun Jackson there. I'm not going to lie. I really thought that's the way you were going to go from the conversation we had there, but that's okay.
We don't want that to be the reason we lose a lot.
I want to, but I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I was the one that
you were the reason.
Canned our lock.
Oh, so you're just good with me being the reason every week. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. I understand it. I get it.
You carry the weight for the rest of the team. That's a burden that not everybody can take. I'm fragile. I have a fragile ego, and I can't take that type of disappointment.
All right. Well, I'm going to take my guy. Does his own research, Cole Beasley, and he's going to be my over.
I've been calling him Delta variant, so that's actually a lot kinder than what I've been calling him.
At the 40.5. So there you go. So those are our locks of the week. Confirmed, locked in. There is our ticket. So we will pull that back. All right. So again, if you are completely unfamiliar with what we just did and what we do, it's locked in. We do that every Thursday during the Thursday Night Football halftime show. Me, Vishaal, and Mason. Our record is terrible. It's absolutely atrocious, but it is a great time.
It started off
a lot of fun.
I'm not gonna lie. First couple
started
of
out
weeks,
pretty
you
decent.
guys were on fire, and then God got involved. It felt like because you just keep getting the hook.
But
you
we
just
have a
keep
great
getting
time.
the hook over and over.
It's always good. You can play along with us on Underdog. Patreon.com/important nonsense. You get these guys' picks every week against the money line, over-unders. You guys are still crushing it on there, doing a fantastic job. All the work that they do is in our $3 tier. If you sign up on our Patreon, you also get access to our Discord. If you have never used Underdog before, if you don't know how it works, you use promo code NONSENSE to sign up. And when you do that, they will double your deposit up to $100. So if you deposit $50, they give you $50 for free just by using our promo code. But this week, or today, specifically today, it may be tomorrow as well, but I know for sure today, if you're already a customer, so if you are already playing along with us every week, if you're already watching along, playing along with Locked In every week, they're doing a Thanksgiving special where anyone that's already a customer that deposits today specifically will get the same bonus as the new people. So again, if you deposit up to $100, they will match you up to $100, whatever it is you deposit. So there you go. Head on over to our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Do that. And if you're a first-time guy, use our promo code NONSENSE. We would really appreciate it. Guys, it was a pleasure. It was wonderful. Neil, any parting thoughts for the people out there?
Sleep through that Bears. Sleep in. If you don't have to get up and drive or just sleep through that morning game, set your picks, set your lineups, take a nap.
Especially if you're on the West Coast like me, do not wake up at 9:30.
Right. Yeah.
Do not wake up at 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Mason and I, it's 10:30, and even I'm like, I could sleep.
I'm going to do it because I hate myself, but if you're a normal person, don't do it.
If you are not a glutton for punishment,
yes,
sleep in, relax. For those of you in other time zones, you're probably already up doing stuff anyway. Work on cleaning the house up. Get the kids situated. Get dinner started. Do something that isn't watch that game. Set your lineups, set your props, go do something else, and then just check in on it throughout the day. You do not need to watch. Only the most diehard, masochistic Bear and Lions fans should actually be watching that game. It has no stakes, and it will be painful to get through. That is my advice, and I hope everybody enjoys the time they get with their family, or at a bare minimum, tolerates it, given how your family actually works. Well, results may vary.
Vishaal, it sounds like you were piggybacking on that, but do you have any parting thoughts for anybody?
No, just enjoy the, long weekend, get your sleep in, and, hopefully you don't have to suffer like I will tomorrow morning.
Mason, are you going to not suffer like everybody else on this call, apparently?
I'm completely comfortable not watching the game at all. And I'm completely comfortable checking the headlines after the game to figure out exactly what happened.
That's the beauty of it.
The only if you get a push notification that says Matt Nagy's been fired, don't worry. You didn't miss anything. So
there you go. I love it. But again, thank you all for joining us. Like I said, there will be no show tomorrow. The guys will be back on Friday for your regular Friday show. It'll be Jack, Mike, and the Nerd. So we look forward to that. Thank you all for watching. And until next week, just keep up the nonsense.
Music for this podcast is provided by Lee Rosevere. I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz. And you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!